a lot of organizations are not accountable to the communities they're operating in because they're more accountable to their funders and who's funding them. And their funders are accountable to maybe some other entities that are actually giving them money to do this work. So a lot of funders are looking for prescribed ways of addressing issues without having the people that they quote unquote have these issues at the heart of all these consultations.
You know, the countries that are on the other end of aid has to have a say in deciding what does and does not count. And I think if we focus our advocacy efforts there, it would actually, and we could make, if we could get a win there, that would make our efforts easier.
The second thing is around skill set. And I want us to challenge the notion of international, global, and local. What is that? Another example, several years ago, we responded to an RFP and we had moved on to the expertise, to the work. We have an office here in Dakar, in Kigali. We've worked across the world, in Africa as well as outside. And one person actually told me, why are your rates like an international agency rates? And I said, excuse me, what defines international? Is it my skill set, my team's skill set, or where I am registered as an organization? Because if it is where registration is, you as a Western organization registered here becomes local. And is that what we're talking about? If it is skill set based, what about my skill set makes it local and your colleague's skill set sitting in London or New York or wherever makes that international? And I think the acceptance that many of us have had that international means global north, international means North America and Europe, and everything south of the hemisphere somehow is local and gets to then be boxed in what also Stephanie was talking about, the resources and the payment that is allocated to skill set that is here, where you have, and I remember on campaigns, one very young white male in a campaign discussion as we're planning around food security said, my great idea is to do a campaign called Hungry Women on a Bus. And Hungry Women on a Bus was supposed to be a bunch of Black women on a bus driving from South Africa to Kenya and campaigning along the way. And I looked at him and said, you're gonna keep him hungry for the whole time? Because just the thought of that, but it just these, and everybody started discussing, how do we make it work? And again, we go back to when this is what defines our advocacy agenda, without really respecting the fact that expertise is expertise, whether it's sitting in Dakar, sitting in Harare, or sitting in Mexico City, we need to really question that. And the final point I want to make around where we're going around this is really, how is it that we are not creating the spaces for us to feel safe calling out racism?
I also think, like I said, paying people significantly less because they don't live in North America or Europe. There's a lot of reasons why people think that this is appropriate. And I think it's actually quite demoralizing and problematic, especially for the people who always get the shortest end of the stick, which is oftentimes Black women. And then I think to decolonize international development is to honor locally rooted expertise, not because we want to use their experience for a campaign, or we want to utilize their language skills because they speak French or Portuguese or all the languages that people like Valerie speak. But because we really, really read their work, we're inspired by their art, we cite their research, we see them as experts, and not a means to an end. And so I just feel like, for me, to decolonize international development is an act of love. And this concept I borrowed from Dr. Rosalias Mesa, and she is a Mexicana psychologist who believes that if you are working within a white patriarchal system rooted in the colonization of Black and brown people, it is a radical act of love to make space for the deconstruction of those paradigms.
The first thing I would say, let's stop calling it local. Expertise is expertise. Because local makes it small. Local makes international expertise wider, deeper, better than local. And local becomes only needed when you are in that particular locality. And going back to what Stephanie says, the costs are different, the pricing are different, the payment are different. I think the question is, what is the expertise that we're looking for? And then getting the expertise that is closest to where the work needs to be done. Because once you think about that, it is no longer called local versus global. And I think that's the first thing that we need to do. Second, I also think that being able to share and position our work. What is it that, I think it was Lorraine that said, somebody who comes on the continent, spend 3 weeks, goes back and is an expert, has traveled and becomes an expert all of a sudden. An African who has spent 20 years working in Latin America, across the continent, in Europe, comes back and is only the expert of that country. So I think part of that understanding scale and just saying, what is the expertise that I seek, and having a variety of expertise. So local knowledge or contextual knowledge is a part of that expertise. And understanding the language is a part of that expertise, but skill set doesn't just sit there. And I think if we add context to a set of expertise, then that even becomes stronger than going outside of the country to get that skill set. I think that is the first thing to say, what do we need, and how important it is understanding context. Relationships are important in the work that we do, and that becomes added value and even things that should be paid more for, not less.